Paul from IAEA, the Insect Pest Control Lab in Vienna, unfortunately couldn't make it, which means that Adam and I have to completely destroy our perfect gender balance in the past couple of panels. But you know, there you have it. So we're not the mosquito experts. I think maybe that's already obvious, but we've taken some of the slides from IAEA and made it into a bit of our own. But we will potentially be a little lighter on the scientific process of mosquito rearing and radiation stuff. But hopefully you'll get the main point across. The first point to note is, in terms of cause of death, for animals causing human death, right? The mosquitoes are number one, and by the way, number two are humans. But by far, mosquitoes are the leading reason for human death. So we know from the conversations of what we've learned over the past year from our colleagues at the Insect Pest Control Lab, they've had over half a century of experience in this, that conventional methods have not all worked as well as one would have hoped. There are a number of different ideas out there that have been used, but it's still a struggle. This is still a major issue. We still have many, many people dying from various different mosquito-borne illnesses. So a very different, innovative, kind of blew my mind because I'm not in this space, approach is, what if we treated those mosquitoes? And there are different ways to treat them, and I'll share some examples. But basically, specifically the male mosquitoes, treat them in such a way that they can't actually reproduce, and therefore reduce the overall mosquito population in a highly affected area. And there are two main methods that scientists have been exploring and actually testing for about 3-4 years now. One of them is called Wolbachia. This is a, what is it called?
Bacteria.
Bacteria, that's the one. A bacteria that you infect the male mosquitoes with, and then they pass them on to other male mosquitoes, and then you basically have them impossible to reproduce, and the overall mosquito population goes down. Another one is called the SIT, the sterile insect technique method, where you use radiation on the male mosquitoes, prevent them from also reproducing, and thus reducing the overall population. So the general idea here is you've got a bunch of mosquitoes, you treat them, the male ones, one way or another, and then you release them by the millions, whether you do that through ground-based release, such as cars, pickup trucks, or helicopters, or planes. As by the way, it's happening over Miami. Millions of mosquitoes being released in order to basically control for Zika and other challenges like that. And so you basically suppress. And I had the opportunity of participating at a phenomenal USAID workshop last July with some of the world's, the world's leading experts in Wolbachia and SIT, and it was one of the statistics that really struck me was when Jeremy said, you know, we have studies now in the past 2 years where we've used SIT and we've seen the overall mosquito population decrease as much as 90%. I mean, that is stunning. And you don't have the kind of environmental effects, right, of spraying all kinds of toxic chemicals and all that kind of stuff with this. So you can do all kinds of different types of ground release. Backpacks this way, but also cars. And that is something that's being used in a number of different countries now, whether it's through Wolbachia or SIT. But as I've stolen some pictures from MSF here, in Papua New Guinea in fact, roads, when they do exist, are not always usable during the rainy seasons. That's going to make your ground release somewhat more challenging. And oh, by the way, not everybody lives next to a road in the first place. And what if we're in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, where we're actually exploring this project specifically with our Peru Flying Labs? There are no roads, as you've already seen, but they're very isolated communities. How do they get support in terms of public health and reduction of mosquito-borne vectors and so on? So we've teamed up with this joint FAO-IAEA Pest Control Lab in Vienna, Austria, and USAID are our donor on this and partner. And what I'm going to do now, I think, is hand it over to Adam to talk more about the engineering. But basically what we have in mind is having these kind of self-contained units where we, the scientists, are rearing the mosquitoes, treating them, breeding millions of them, and then we release them both by ground-based release and also by air. Not one or the other, but complementary.
Oh, nice, the clicker. Thank you. So yeah, I'll explain a little bit what we're trying to do. Now, in most cases, as we've seen today, our role as WeRobotics is not a technology developer. We get this question a lot. We're not a drone maker. There's lots of great drones out there. There's tech partners that we work with. There's lots of great software as well for imagery and all of this. But sometimes you find problems that, that have a big impact, big public health impact such as this, but the technology just doesn't exist, and there's no mosquito release mechanisms out there that we could use. So this is where we try to step in and say, okay, well, why don't we just develop this and see how well it actually works. So I'll show a little bit of what we're trying to do here. Now, the goal here is, as Patrick said, there's different ways of releasing mosquitoes. Release them from a road, from a helicopter. In some situations, roads are impassable, and as we know with drones and planes are often very expensive, and drones are often a cheaper way of releasing something or of taking imagery from the air. So the idea here is to use a drone, release a few 100,000 mosquitoes from it. And we have a few advantages of this as well compared to other techniques. Cheaper than airplanes, also more homogeneous of a release than from a backpack or from a road. What's important is mosquitoes, they don't all clump together in one tiny little group. They're all over the place, so you want to be able to release enough mosquitoes, but in kind of a planned way in a different area. So we're doing our first test with this massive machine over here. So it's a little bit bigger than some of the drones we've seen. It's smaller than some of the big military drones out there. It's a DJI M600 Pro, it's called. It's about several times the size of me, but something like that. And it weighs a few kilograms, and it is, I'd say, still quite affordable. Costs about $3,000–4,000. Again, our goal is not to reinvent a brand new type of drone for releasing mosquitoes. The drones exist. What we want to do is the system to actually release the mosquitoes from such a drone. So what we're developing here, we're going to start with the drone, which already exists. Then we have to develop a release mechanism, so basically something you put a lot of mosquitoes in and then spread them out over an area. And then there is, as in any system, a bit of a control and intelligence part. So this is the app that we will use and the algorithms to be able to fly around an area and spread the mosquitoes in a controlled manner over this area. So just to show a little bit, we're just starting out this project. It's been a couple months that we've been working on it. The first part here is the release mechanism. There's a few challenges here that we've had to deal with, and as you know, a lot of drone engineers in the team, we've never faced some of these challenges. So moving parts and all this is okay, but there is definitely a refrigeration challenge. So when it comes to mosquitoes, you can't just take a bunch of buzzing mosquitoes and shove them into a box. They'll get really angry with each other, and then they'll start, you know, moving around, damaging themselves. They're very fragile insects, actually. So to actually pack them up, what you do is you cool them down. You put them into a lethargic sleep somewhere near the freezing point, and then you can actually pack them really, really tightly. But as soon as they warm up and as soon as they wake up, they start buzzing again and they damage themselves. So the first thing you have to do is keep them cold. So we have a bit of a cooling mechanism, basically ice packs that are put around, and we have to keep the cold chain to make sure that they stay cold in the sleep. Very interesting and applicable research for any sort of medical delivery, as well as there's often cold chain that needs to be respected. And then the other part that's difficult is to make sure we can actually release them safely without damaging them as we spit them out of the mechanism, and make sure that they stay cold for the right amount of time. Because as we've been told by IAEA, you know, if they wake up too early, they damage themselves. But if you throw them out and they fall to the ground, they get eaten by predators. So we have to make sure that they're flying kind of halfway while they're falling out of the drone. So there's a few parameters to kind of optimize here. So that's one thing we have to take care of. And for testing, another thing we have to make sure is that, well, we have something that, you know, we don't have millions of mosquitoes just kind of hanging around that we can test with. So we have to choose kind of substitute mechanisms or substitute materials that represent mosquitoes, but that can be safely thrown around without a lot of people getting angry that there's buzzing mosquitoes. So there are these lovely bug-shaped sweets, but they don't actually have the properties of mosquitoes. So we're doing a little bit of testing. You know, what represents sleeping mosquitoes? We're using a couple different types of herbs in the end. Anise and cumin apparently look a lot like mosquitoes, but they don't bite, which is good. And then the next trick is, how do you get all of these mosquitoes out in a controlled manner? So we have kind of a first prototype that we're playing with here. It's basically a curved treadmill to make sure that the mosquitoes stay in the middle, they don't get caught in the sides. We have this canister that gets slotted in, and we can see the pretend mosquitoes kind of falling out. We can imagine this underneath the drone being attached and mosquitoes being sent out. So that's the mechanism part. The next part is the app. So kind of following up on what Oriel was saying, we need something that needs to be very simple. The goal is not to have trained operators, you know, super drone experts in the field operating this. The goal is to make it super easy. So we have a standard canister of mosquitoes that you can put in. Then you press a button, and then we have an app that we're developing that will resemble a lot of the more advanced, hopefully, iPhone apps out there that can control, release, and make everything as autonomous as possible. So not much to show yet, but we're working on it. Just a little picture of our office, a couple of the machines, and a couple of the engineers. The only members of WeRobotics that couldn't make it out to this conference because they're busy designing things back at the engineering office in Zurich. And just to give an idea of what we're hoping to do here, so this is the timeline here. We are going to have the first prototype ready in the next few weeks. We're going to integrate it in the drone and do some field tests in Vienna, because our partner IAEA is based in Vienna. We'll be releasing only cumin in Austria, don't worry. But the goal is to go in the direction of going to Peru and meeting up with Juan's team at the Flying Lab and doing field tests in Peru with live mosquitoes, hopefully, and if not, you know, go towards that to see how this actually works in the Peruvian context.
Just an extra point here is what we're looking to do as well, specifically in Peru, is to understand what flight parameters to optimize in order to have the kind of mosquito dispersal effect that we need. Speed, altitude, what do we do when we're over mountainous terrain or flat terrain? How do we take into account wind speed and so on? Because we want that kind of uniform distribution. We're also starting to explore at the advice of our donor USAID, a partnership with Monash University, who are the world leaders in Slovakia. They're already doing ground-based release in a number of different hotspots, some of the, again, leading experts in the space. So, you know, we're kind of agnostic in terms of what kind of mosquitoes hitch a ride on our drones, right? As long as the effect is fewer people dying and being affected by these mosquitoes. And again, as Adam Wright mentioned, this is very much helping to build the capacity of our Peru flying labs as well, right? Because ultimately it won't be Adam or I who fly all the way to Peru to do this as part of a project with the Ministry of Health. It'll be the Peru Flying Labs team with local partners and stakeholders who then have the expertise and technology, know how to use this release mechanism, are working with IAEA and the Ministry of Health to do this themselves, so they're at the front lines of these public health efforts in the country, and not just in the country, but hopefully in the region as well. And to end on a picture without any mosquitoes, you know, we're always thinking about multiple applications. So here you saw cumin, you saw herbs falling out, but what about seeds as well? There's a group that Andrew Zolli reconnected me with recently that's actually has some decent venture capital funding to actually spread seeds. They're doing this starting to do this in one country. They're starting to get clients. We could put seeds in this mosquito release mechanism as well if there were a use case in one of our flying labs, for example. So we're always thinking about, you know, how to repurpose some of the engineering solutions that we're developing. So thank you very much.